Hey y'all, I'm Carrie, and this is Monstrous, Spooky Edition. All right, we are back. Ashley's with us again this week for another spooky
Hello, everybody.
episode. So this week, we are going to dive into a spooky season favorite. One that has a long history within our culture today. It has been marked with both mystical lore and family entertainment. It is considered fun with an element of the unknown. Today, we are diving into the origins of the Ouija board.
Ooh, the Ouija board.
So, the real history behind the board and the mysterious way in which it works is just as odd and as mystifying as the board itself. This board strikes both fear and wonder into so many people across the world, and yet no one truly knows its origins. With the board's popularity, how is it possible that no one truly knows where it came from? Well, I dug into this very question and found the answer.
Let's hear those answers.
Ouija boards have been used in a wide range of things since the talking board was first invented. In 1920, a large amount of reports were put out by would-be crime sleuths, turning to their boards for clues in the mysterious murder of a New York gambler, Joseph Burton Elwell. In 1921, the New York Times reported that a Chicago woman was sent to a psychiatric hospital after she had tried to explain that she wasn't suffering from mania, but that her Ouija board had told her to leave her mother's dead body in the living room for 15 days before burying her in the backyard.
That's crazy.
In 1930, newspapers covered the accounts of two women in Buffalo, New York, who had murdered another woman because the board had encouraged them to do it. In 1941, a 23-year-old gas station attendant in New Jersey stated to the New York Times that he had joined the army because the board had told him to. Then, in 1958, a Connecticut court decided not to honor the, quote, Ouija board will of Helen Dow Peck, who had left only $1,000 to two servants and the rest of her $152,000 estate to that of John Gale Forbes, a bodiless spirit who had contacted her through her Ouija board. So this lady left $152,000 to a fucking ghost because a Ouija board told her to.
Yeah, that's crazy. Hell no.
Mind-boggling. Ouija boards have even inspired literary pieces. In 1916, Pearl Curran made headlines for her poetry and stories that she claimed were dictated to her through the board by the spirit of a 17th century English woman named Patience Worth. The following year, her friend Emily Grant Hutchings claimed her book was dictated to her through the board by Samuel Clems, also known as Mark Twain. Curran had great success, while Hutchings not so much. But neither gained as much as that of the Pulitzer Prize-winning poet James Merrill. In 1982, his Ouija board inspired and, according to him, dictated his poem that won the National Book Critics Circle Award. So nowadays, the Ouija board has more 21st century features, like in Paranormal Activities 1 and 2, episodes of Breaking Bad, Castle, Rizzoli and Isles, and many other paranormal TV shows. Along with apparel, the board is seen in Hot Topic, and now there's even an app for on-the-go communication with the dead. Through the years, the Ouija board grew a reputation, and what's surprising is how fast that reputation and popularity soured. So, if you grew up here in the US, then you're probably familiar with the Ouija board, whether you've seen it in movies and TV shows or you've used one yourself. This mysterious board has captivated all of us for over 100 years. And although the board is a big part of pop culture, little is truly known about it. Millions of people all over the world, especially here in the US, have had their hands on a Ouija board at one point in time. Thousands have reported eerie and scary communications with a world that is beyond the veil of our own. While some say the Ouija board is nothing more than a board game, others swear it's nothing to be played with. This brings us back to the questions. Where did they come from? Who invented them? Do they actually work? And why is it called the Ouija board? Well, the Ouija board we know today isn't the first of its kind. It's just the first to become what it is today. Talking boards were around well before the Ouija board. Some date back to pre 1886. Some look like the Ouija board today, and some don't. The earliest versions featured different tools to receive messages. Some used dial plates, and some used knocking sounds to mean each letter and number. The first planchette wasn't anything like what we have today either. It was the same teardrop shape, but it had a hole in it for a pencil to go into to write the answer to the question instead of the little piece of glass. The board that became the Ouija board and that inspired the mass flux of people drawn to it was born in Chestertown, Maryland in 1886. The Ouija board came right out of the 19th century American obsession with none other than spiritualism. Spiritualism, for anyone that doesn't know, is the belief that one can communicate with the dead. Spiritualism, despite its prominence in Europe, didn't really impact America until 1848. It came from the prominence of none other than the Fox sisters. These sisters claimed that they had received messages from spirits who knocked on the walls to answer their questions, something they recreated in many places across New York State. So, thanks to the Fox sisters and others like them in national news, spiritualism reached millions of followers by the second half of the 19th century. In the 19th century, death was a normal part of everyday's lives. The relationship that they had with death was far different than the one we have now. Now, most people do everything they can to keep from aging, and the thought of death, well, nearly everyone avoids it. But in the 19th century, death was all around them, something they talked about nearly every day. This was a time where you only lived to be 50. Mothers that had 12 children would bury 6 of them, and their parlors were their funeral homes. In a country during a time where religion was basically what you lived for, many could hold a seance on Saturday and go to church on Sunday with no fear of God's wrath. This belief system worked for Americans, and so it was accepted, and seances were held on a regular basis. During the Civil War, spiritualism grew due to the desperate people wanting to connect with their loved ones who had left for war and never came home. These seances offered closures and answers to many. During this time, the average lifespan was less than 50 years. Women often died in childbirth, children died of diseases, and men died in war. Even Mary Todd Lincoln, the first lady, held seances. And she held them right there inside the White House. After her and President Lincoln's 11-year-old son died of a fever in 1862. How was that fun fact for you? The fucking first lady held seances in the fucking White House. But these seances were often boring. You would sit around waiting for the knock at the right letter. It took forever. Sometimes, though, rare, participants would use automatic writing, or they would place their hands on top of a table and watch as it began to shake and rattle, which that's often what you see in scary movies or movies with seances. Is it's a group of people sitting around the table, they have candles lit, they say, oh, we welcome you or whatever, and the table lifts and rises and shakes, right? So
Right.
you could reach people at a distance faster than you could someone on the other side. So why shouldn't contacting spirits be just as easy as sending a telegram?
Right.
Many entrepreneurs realize this, but the first to really nail this was the Kinnard Novelty Company. In 1886, the Associated Press reported on a new phenomenon that was taking over the spiritualism world in Ohio, and it was the talking board.
The
This
talking
article had,
board.
yep, that's what it was originally called, the talking board.
Okay.
So this first article had reached far and wide. Everyone who was picking up a paper to read the article about the talking board and how everyone was crazy about it. One of these people was Charles Kinnard of Baltimore, Maryland. Charles Kinnard was a businessman, and like most businessmen, he always had his eye out for a chance to make a buck. But he wasn't the best or the luckiest at it, nor was he the most honest man either. Charles was the second child of a Delaware merchant. In the 1880s, he moved to Maryland's Eastern Shore after he developed a secret bone mix recipe. After his first run of success, things went downhill. He had to auction off his Chestertown plant because of the drought, competition, and debt, but he didn't lose hope. Next door to him, there was a Persian immigrant named E.C. Reish, who had an office next to Kinnard on the first floor of a 4-story hotel in Chestertown's small business district. Reish was a furniture maker, turned coffin maker, turned undertaker. He was clearly an introvert like Charles, and Charles had made a plan for the two of them. Newspapers began to talk about this new talking board sweeping through Ohio. And it was around this time that the two men began to collaborate and make their very own talking board. According to Robert Murch, a world famous talking board historian, yes, that is a thing, and it is apparently a job title.
Really?
A talking board historian.
Huh.
Reish had made the boards on the side, like as a, like a hobby. But it was Kinnard who once left Chestertown for Baltimore in 1890 that, on top of continuing his fertilizer business, started a real estate business and began to pitch what he said was his talking board to investors. So, yeah, an undertaker and an opportunistic businessman are the ones to have invented the only patented board and the only game to ever outsell Monopoly in a single year.
Huh.
Just two random dudes.
Two random dudes.
Yeah. After countless rejections, Elijah Bond, a local attorney who had made claims that his sister was a strong medium, took interest in the board. And his claim about his sister would later be proven right. She herself proved to be a very convincing part of this entire thing. She was why they were able to even get a patent for the board in the first place.
Huh.
She is not only credited for getting the stamp of being a real medium from the federal government, but also for receiving the name for the board from the board itself. So soon after, the Kinnard Novelty Company was born. It was incorporated the day before Halloween, 134 years ago this year. Once they became a company, they began to make the Ouija boards very similar to how they look today. In 1890, Charles brought in a group of 4 investors, which included Elijah Bond, but did not include E.C. Reach, to start the Kinder Novelty Company. And it was created to exclusively create and market a new talking board. None of these men believed in spiritualism. They were businessmen, and they had found a big ticket item and they were simply acting on it. The Ouija board that we all know today was created right here in the United States for the purpose of communicating with the supernatural. This board, however, was not the Ouija board. It, in fact, had no name.
No name at all.
Nope, it was just another talking board.
Huh.
So Elijah Bond, who, like I said before, was an attorney who was an investor in the group, had a sister who was said to be a strong medium. Her name was Helen Peters. The group of investors, led by Helen Peters, all sat around a table and began to talk with the board. They asked the board what it should be called, and the board spelled Ouija. And when they asked the board what that meant, the board replied, "Good luck."
Weird.
Talk about eerie, cryptic, spooky, and literally all of the fucking things.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Not a chance.
Like, I'm
I'm
good.
good. Thank you.
So it's often believed that the word Ouija comes from the French word oi and the German word ja, which stands for yes. But that's a misconception. The board got its name from the board itself. And Ouija is actually an ancient Egyptian word. And I did look it up. It does, in fact, mean good luck. So these random, like, 6 people are sitting around this table talking to this board that they have no idea if it works or not. They don't believe in this stuff. Are like, "Oh, what should we call you?" And it spits out an old ancient Egyptian word that means good luck. I would
Kinda
nope.
cool.
No, I would nope right the fuck out of there.
Yeah. At least it says good luck.
No, thank you. I'm gonna pass on that. You start speaking some ancient language that no fucking body on the face of this planet knows how to speak. I'm good. Get the fuck out. Goodbye. Okay, anyway. A descendant from one of the founders had been interviewed. And in this interview, they confirmed the story. And this is based on the story that they had heard from their families, as well as the story from the board patent request. So, the group knew that if they could not prove that the board worked, they would never get their patent.
You said they will never get it?
No, if they couldn't prove that the board actually worked, the patent office wasn't going to give them a patent on it. You know what that is, right?
No.
Okay, so a patent is like if I invent something, okay?
Okay.
And I put in a patent request and it gets approved. That means that, like, I own it. No one else can use it
Oh.
without permission. So, like, you know, like that little TM that's on stuff.
Yeah.
That's kind of like a patent.
Okay.
Like, I own this. You can't own it. You can't use it without permission because then I could sue you.
Okay.
And they knew that if they couldn't prove this thing worked, they weren't going to get it because you can't just walk in there and request a patent and you get it. Like, you have to prove that your thing actually works in order for you to get it, because a patent is something you're given from the federal government. Like, they don't just hand that shit out to everybody willy-nilly, you know?
Yeah.
So, knowing this, Bond brought his sister with him to the patent office in Washington when he filed the application. The chief patent officer had demanded a demonstration on how the board worked. He wanted to know if the board could accurately spell out his name, and if it could, he'd allow the application to proceed. So they sat down, summoned the spirits, and the planchette spelled out the patent officer's name correctly. And on February 10th, 1891, a white-faced and shaken chief patent officer awarded Bond a patent on his very new toy or game, whichever you want to call it. So the original patent does not say how the board works, just that it does. The first advertisement for
Okay.
the first advertisement for the Ouija board came that very February. It appeared in papers as the quote, Ouija, the wonderful talking board. And it was an instant hit. And from the day the board was introduced, newspapers reported on its use to communicate with the dead, predict catastrophes, solve mysteries, and even to commit crimes. A Pittsburgh toy and novelty shop described it as a magical device that answered your questions, quote, about the past, present, and future with marvelous accuracy. And they promised, quote, never failing amusement and recreation for all the classes. And even claimed that the board had a link, quote, between the known and unknown, the material and immaterial. An advertisement in a New York
I was gonna
newspaper
say,
said the board was interesting and mysterious, and they testified that this claim was proven before the board ever left the patent office. So, as we all know, toys often come with a bit of false advertising, even in a small way. But the Ouija board, however, was in fact real and did work. It had been proven right there in the patent office. And even today, many psychologists believe that the board does truly offer a connection between the known and unknown. By 1892, the company went from one factory in Baltimore to two, along with two in New York, two in Chicago, and even one in London. By 1893, Kennard and Bond, the two main men that started the company, were out. And William Fuld, who started as an employee and stockholder, was now on top running the show. Kennard had attempted to make and sell a knockoff version of the board after he left the Kennard Company, but failed following a lawsuit. Bond, however, was smarter. He waited until just after the original patent had expired to create his knockoff version. This one, though, had featured symbols that were associated with Indian religion rather than that of the fascist religion. In 1898, after receiving the blessing from the majority shareholder and one of the original investors, William Fuld licensed the exclusive rights to make the board. So that means that he allowed someone to purchase the rights to make the board. So, like another company. The 1910s and 1920s brought a surge to the world of Ouija. With the devastation of World War I and the manic years of jazz music and prohibition, as the popularity of the board continued to grow through World War I, you couldn't talk to anyone that hadn't used one, and very few didn't own one themselves. During this time, a newspaper broke news about Pearl Curran, who I mentioned earlier. She was a housewife from St. Louis who had used the board to talk to the spirit of a 17th century woman named Patience Worth. And she became famous not only for that, but because of what the board had allegedly dictated to her for her poems. By the time the board had reached popularity in 1920, many of the original investors and former employees of the Kenner Novelty Company had written into the Baltimore Evening Sun claiming to be the original inventor, which of course none of them were. The closest person to being the real inventor was E.C. Reich, who had died in 1899, so he was unable to make his claim. By remaining in the background and out of the public feud, though, William Fuld was able to make the Ouija board his legacy. He was even named the inventor by Parker Brothers from 1978 to 1989 during their own advertisement for the board. So most believe that the Ouija board is a simple, fun parlor game, right?
Yeah.
But that may not be entirely accurate. The board has a dark side to it as well. By the early 1890s, over 2,000 boards were being sold every week. So, of course, money was at stake. William Fuld, who had originally worked for the company, took control of the business after Kennard had cashed out. Fuld went on to make millions making these boards. But this didn't happen until his own brother was cut out of the company. William's brother Isaac was so angry and bitter about this that he had his very own infant daughter's body exhumed and relocated to the Fuld family gravesite during a cemetery renovation. So for some reason, his brother was like, "Oh, I'll get William back. I'm going to bury my daughter's body in his family gravesite." I don't get it. It doesn't really make sense to me, but apparently, I don't know. But that's what he
Yeah.
did. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me.
That's crazy.
Apparently, that was a ha, got ya. I don't know.
Uh,
So the two sides of the family didn't speak for 96 years because of this fallout
that's a long time.
over a fucking board.
Oh my god.
Like, it's not funny, but it is because it's a board. Like, for real?
People
I
fight
don't
over the most craziest things.
exactly. I don't speak to many people in my family, but it's definitely not over a fucking Ouija board. So dumb. Anyway, so far we have the board causing nothing but money hungry, selfish men and decade long family feuds. So, what else could go wrong, right?
Right.
Well, William Fuld died in 1927 after he fell from the roof of his new factory. A factory that he claimed the Ouija board told him to buy. Talk about fucking ominous. Like the board tells you to buy this factory and then you fall off the roof and die.
No, that's out there.
Well, there's newspaper articles. He did fall off of that factory. That really is how he died. But if the board told him to buy it, I don't know. Nobody knows. That's just what he
And then all
says.
of a sudden you're at your death. That's creepy.
Yeah. Some people speculate that he'd committed suicide, but that doesn't make sense to me. Why would he go buy this brand new factory? I mean, he's pulling in millions. Why would he buy the factory to just jump off of it?
Right.
That doesn't make sense to me. I find it, like you said, out there for the board to tell him to buy, but who knows? Who knows? Maybe his brother died and was trying to get revenge. I don't know. So William Fuld did not invent the board. We all know this. But his obituary said he did. Advertisements and many other companies said he did. He himself, though, never claimed to have invented it. He just made it and sold it. So during the Great Depression, the Fooled Company had to open new factories to keep up with the demand for the Ouija board. Over a span of 5 months, one department store in New York had sold 50,000 boards. 5 months in one store. 50,000 Ouija boards. Like, could you imagine?
No.
That's a lot of fucking boards.
Yeah.
I don't even want one of them, let alone 50,000. So, despite these men, and especially Fooled, who had been quoted as saying he was not a spiritualist, he was actually a pescatarian. In 1941, they came out with a new box design. This box design had featured a blue ghost, which was modeled after the 1909 sculpture Eternal Silence by Lorado Taft, I think is how you say it, a monument that stands in Chicago's Graceland Cemetery. Which I have pictures of all of this. I have a picture of the sculpture, the box, all of that I'm going to put on the Facebook page for everybody to go see.
Okay.
So even though the Parker brothers had followed through with leaving the ghosts out of their advertisement, the box didn't change after they bought the patent rights to the board. They left this ghostly looking statue on the box, which to me, I'm like, you're leaving this blue ghost on the front of the box. I feel like that's an advertisement for the board to be able to talk to ghosts. But that's just me. So for decades, the blue ghost remained on the front of the box. It had been known for the blue ghost. But the year after The Exorcist was released, the ghost was removed. The new box was the image of two people's hands on the board. And it had no suggestion at all that the Ouija board was anywhere near supernatural in nature. So The Exorcist came out and it was, get rid of that.
Right.
Don't want association with the devil over here.
No.
So 4 decades after Fould's fatal accident, his family sold the board and the rights along with it to none other than Parker Brothers. The Parker Brothers immediately moved the board's headquarters to Salem, Massachusetts. Because, why not? The first year after moving it to a town that is infamous for its witch trials, they sold 2 million Ouija boards. In 12 months,
Crazy.
365 days, they sold 2 million boards. Outrageous to me. I thought 50,000 was a lot.
Yeah.
In 1967, America saw more troops head off to Vietnam. The Summer of Love in San Francisco took place, and the race riots in Newark, Detroit, Minneapolis, and Milwaukee. And so because of the wake of devastation, a year after the Parker brothers bought the board from the Fooled Company, 2 million more boards were sold, making the Ouija board the only game of that year to outsell Monopoly. And I made the comparisons. An early version of the family favorite Monopoly was invented in 1903. But it really wasn't popular until the Great Depression. The Ouija board, on the other hand, was popular and a must-have from the time it hit the streets. So ghosts and the spook factor have always been a go-to, especially here in America. Like all the creepy shit.
Right.
Gotta have it. But only 5 years later, 5 years following the success of the new Parker Brothers purchase, people began to think of the Ouija board in an entirely new way. In 1971, William Peter Blatty wrote a book based on a real case from 1949. This case was about a child who had allegedly been possessed by a demon after using a Ouija board. His book later became a movie. You know what movie that is?
What movie is that?
This was the birth of The Exorcist.
What?
The book itself sold 13 million copies. And following its release, it cemented the Ouija board's reputation as a demonic pop culture symbol. Even still, all claims of Ouija board inspiration, for the most part, were non threatening. There were a few murders that were claimed to have been urged by the Ouija board, but, I feel like that's just people just trying to get out of prison time for killing somebody.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, The Exorcist is based off of an alleged true, real thing
Huh.
that actually happened. Yeah. A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Yeah. Like, obviously, it was adapted to where it could be a movie and, make money, obviously, but it is based off a real thing. So, anyway. So, Ouija board, all of that, non-threatening, right?
Yeah.
At least until 1973. And this year, the very first Exorcist movie came out. So we have the ones today, right?
Yeah.
All the, the fancy stuff. But the very first one came out in 1973. And it scared the shit out of people. And when you thought the book changed how people saw the board, the movie changed it even more.
Huh.
The pea soup, head spinning 12-year-old girl possessed by a demon after playing with a Ouija board, and supposedly being based on a true story, turned the board into a tool of the devil, and in turn changed pop culture and gave a new storyline to none other than scary movies. One that was usually around opening the door to evil demons that were hell bent on ripping people apart for some reason. So, in the following years, the board was denounced by religious groups as Satan's method of communication, but it never lost its popularity, even though it was popular for a totally different reason.
Yeah.
So, people still wanted it. Some because they loved it, others because they hated it. So, according to a 1986 interview with the then president of Parker Brothers, Robert B. M. Barton, the company had originally bought the Ouija board for $975,000. So, do you want to guess what that would be in today's money?
What would that be?
$9,473,027 in today's money.
Damn.
So nearly $9.5 million for Ouija.
That's crazy.
Yeah. At that point in time, the Ouija board was the most expensive purchase the company had ever made. And according to Barton, the company had made this money back in only 2 years.
2 years, really?
Yep. 2 years is all it took for them to make their money back off their purchase.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Could you fucking imagine? Oh.
No.
So, in 2001 in New Mexico, the board was being burned in bonfires alongside copies of Harry Potter and Snow White.
Hmm.
How in the hell any of those three things go together or are even similar? I don't know. But
I don't know.
they are apparently, at least in New Mexico. Religious groups were wary of the board. They cited scripture and denounced it, of course. Catholics.com said the board is far from harmless. In 2011, the 700 Club host said that demons can reach us through the board. Even those within the paranormal community were wary of it. Despite the change in how people saw the board, Parker Brothers and later Hasbro, after they acquired the Parker Brothers in 1991, still sold hundreds of thousands of them. But why people were buying the board had drastically changed. The Ouija board was now spooky, not spiritual, and it gave off a sense of danger. Today, Hasbro controls the patent for the board, And occasionally, it allows a release for movies and TV shows that tie into special editions, such as that as their Stranger Things Ouija board edition. But they don't sell the board as a part of its regular line of products. If you go to the Hasbro website and search Ouija board, nothing shows up.
Nothing at all.
No, they don't sell it as a part of their regular line products you can buy any given day.
Oh.
Yeah, it's like a once in a year kind of thing. Like when, when your favorite coffee creamer comes out at fucking Christmas time.
Shit.
I guess it keeps its, I don't know, relevance or something. I don't know. So, the Ouija board today is basically the same as the old one. Anyone that's ever seen one Ouija board has seen them all. But for anyone that has not seen one, it's just a flat board. It's got yes in the left corner, no in the right, the letters of the alphabet, A through M across the top, and underneath that is N through Z. The rows of letters are in an arch shape, kind of like a small semicircle. Below the letters are numbers 0 to 9, and at the bottom of the board is the word goodbye. With each board, you get a planchette. A planchette is a tear-shaped sliding pointer with a small hole or window in the body of it. This is used to maneuver around the board and know which letters, numbers, or words are being pointed at. With this said planchette, the board seemingly moves to each thing on the board of its own accord. But the biggest difference between the boards today and those when they first came out are the materials that they are made out of. For the most part, they look the same. They might, have the colors might be brighter than they were back then, but the layout is the same. The board is usually nowadays made of cardboard, but when it was first invented, they used wood. The planchette is now plastic with felt feet rather than a lightweight wood and casters. So one of the biggest wonders about the boards is how does it work? Well, according to scientists, these boards are not powered by spirits or demons. They're powered by us. Even if you swear you didn't move the planchette. Scientists say the Ouija boards work on a principle that is known and has been known for more than 160 years. This is the idometer effect. I know, you're confused. Trust me, I was too. I was like, what the fuck is this? I've never heard of it before. So, obviously, I had to look at it. Because, it's just me. So, in 1852, William Benjamin Carpenter published a report for the Royal Institution of Great Britain that examined the automatic movements within our muscles that happen without conscious awareness or of our own volition. Kind of like in your sleep, you might move your leg. You're not consciously moving your leg. It just happens. So almost immediately following this report, researchers saw a chance to prove the idometer effect was real and that this effect was being seen with the flux of spiritualism and the Ouija board. So in 1853, Michael Faraday, who was intrigued by table turning, had conducted a series of experiments that proved to him, at least, that the table motion was due to the idometer actions of those participating in the seance. To most scientists, the results were convincing. Dr. Chris French, a professor at the University of London, stated, quote, "It can guarantee a very strong impression that the movement is being caused by some outside agency, but it's not." He further states, quote, "The thing about all these mechanisms we're talking about, dowsing rods, Ouija boards, pendulums, these small tables, they're all devices whereby quite a small muscular movement can cause quite a large effect." So in other words, they're tiny things. Just the smallest movement is going to make it look like it's way bigger than what it really is. The planchettes are perfect for this effect. Their shape, the feet on them, real easy to move them and not even be aware that you're doing it. Planchettes, when they were first made, was a very light wood. They were fitted with small casters, which helped them move smoothly. So, you twitch your finger, the thing is going to move. Nowadays, they're plastic, which is even lighter than wood. So, the reputation and the public image of the board had become complicated. It's always been complicated, really. Originally, the board was a mysterious oracle. It was marketed as a game. But what is less known is the board's inspiration or use as an automatic writing tool used by novelists and poets such as Sylvia Plath and James Merrill and the others I mentioned at the beginning of the episode. But as time has went on, the innocence of the board has gave way to a more sinister side, such as that in Hollywood. After The Exorcist was released, the board's occult ties and status were cemented. Since the Ouija board hit Hollywood, it has appeared in more than 20 different movies and a countless number of TV shows. And in 2024, once again, Ouija boards are on the rise. From the economic uncertainty that we face to the board's usefulness as a plot in movies, it's no surprise that still, 134 years later, the board is still booming and all the rage this time of year. It shows that it has tapped into a weird place that the American culture loves and in many cases thrives on. And that is the origins of the Ouija board. It was pretty fun to look into that one.
Right.
You won't catch me dead with my hands on a Ouija board, but it was still fun to look into it.
Girl, you wouldn't even have a Ouija board close to you.
Nope, I'm good. Like,
Right.
I don't know if it's real. I don't know if it actually works.
Well, let's find out.
But I've heard plenty of stories. I've seen plenty of movies, plenty of TV shows. I'm not about to find out.
Yeah, but you've not experienced it yourself, though.
And I don't want to. I have enough trauma that could probably fill the lives of 10 people. There's no fucking way I would ever touch a Ouija board because them damn demons and ghosts would attach themselves to me and I'd never get rid of the motherfuckers. Like,
You'd be stuck for life.
exactly. My trauma is enough. I don't need a ghost or a demon on top of it, okay? All right, so any final thoughts before we sign off? Opinions? Anything? Revelations before we sign off?
Nope.
Okay. We'll be back this Sunday for our regular episode. We hope you keep listening and remember to...
Watch for monsters. This is Ashley and we're signing out.
And don't kill people. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, you.
Please be sure to rate and review so we can make sure we give y'all a podcast you love. Be sure to subscribe so you get notifications each week when episodes air.
If you want to send us a case or a topic suggestion, you can email us at monstroustcpod@gmail.com.
Also, be sure to check out our Facebook page for updates along with information and photos for each week's episodes.